Hello and welcome back to another vlog. It's been a bit of a struggle this week. We've had some rough weather here in the UK, so my pain levels have been higher and my fatigue levels especially have been really high. That's probably also from coming back home after the holidays and starting PhD stuff again and just dealing with a lot of other things. So it's not surprising, and it is as ever just a thing I have to deal with, and that's why I'm part-time, is so I can deal with that sometimes I get up and I feel too many emotions and I don't function, and just do my best through that. So what you're seeing here is me doing some reading on the Monday. I headed into campus, read an article on mad epistemologies, which had been referenced in something else I was reading. It was really useful. It was really nice to have some thoughts about meaning making and knowledge production as a mad person and amongst the mad community. And I think that's going to be really useful, and I'm definitely going to be using it as a reference. I then started reading Empire of Normality, which is by Robert Chapman. They are a really incredible neurodiversity philosopher and theorist, and I'm not very far into it, but I'm super excited and enjoying it, and it's going to be, because it's a big part of my opening argument to why exploring mad identity is unique and important, is this idea that as mad people our identity is inherently constructed in opposition to capitalism, because this concept of what is normal and what is neurodiverse is very largely based in a reaction to what capitalism demands of us and of our body minds. So I think it's going to be super useful. I've done some little bits of reading, more of it through the week, although it very much has been the struggle bus. I didn't actually go in for my second campus day this week, because there were a few days where, so sometimes because my immune system is compromised, when I get really run down, I'm much more liable to get a cold and things like that, and that happened at the start of this week, and I was just grotty and unhappy, so I stayed home on the Thursday, also to make sure I don't give said cold to anyone. It's definitely a cold. I tested myself for COVID, so we're all good there, but as much as I mask, I still don't want to pass that on to people. So I stayed home. I did my mentoring remotely. My mentor was fantastic, because I was when I was thinking about stuff on Monday, I'd written a couple of questions down that I wanted to think about for the chapter. One of which is whether there's, public critiques like reviews, be they like formal journalistic reviews or Steam reviews or whatever, of Slay the Princess, and are any of them ableist in any way? Like, is the critique of it based in ableism, is something I'm curious about and want to look into. This is nothing I have a basis for, by the way, just a thought that I had. But then my other question was whether I still need Song of Sire, which is the other visual novel I was looking at in this chapter, at all, because whilst it is based around mad identity, because the concept of, and I'm going to spoil Song of Sire for you, by the way, so if you have any interest in playing Song of Sire or Sire no Uta, apologies for that pronunciation, then look away now. The entire game is about someone having their mind modified by essentially an alien, a sort of eldritch alien kind of thing, that causes him to see the quote-unquote normal as monstrous and the so-called monstrous as normal. And this flips so that he sees the alien sire as a young girl, but he sees all of his friends as mutated monsters and the world as made of flesh and other horrors. So in that sense, it's a very kind of binary flip. It's not that simplistic. There are ways in which it develops more. Like, some of his companions that become like the everyman kind of character do end up developing their own forms of madness in a way that's very interesting. But I think fundamentally Song of Sire is much more about what happens if you take the so-called normal and the so-called monstrous and muddle them up, which I think does have things to say about mad identity, but I don't know that it goes fully in line with what I'm arguing, which is for a much more mutable idea, because the protagonist in Sire very much gets just flipped fully into monstrousness, right? Or fully into madness as the game is positing it. So it's very different to the mad experience of living in a world or trying to work out who you are. And I think Slay the Princess gets to the heart of that idea a lot better than Song of Sire does. And it was through discussing this with my mentor that she helped me realise that I do already know that I want to reduce the amount that Song of Sire is present in the chapter. I still want to use it as an example. I still think it's a really useful and powerful example, and I still feel very strongly that I want some Japanese origin visual novels present in the chapter, so I'm not, I'm doing proper homage to the origin of visual novels as a medium. So yeah, that's a thing that I sorted this week as well. So in that sense, I have done quite a bit this week, as much as it doesn't feel like I have. And hopefully I can just keep going and continue in this way next week. I'd love to get a little bit more written, but we'll see how it goes. I've got a list of things I'd like to try and do, and what happens, and what I manage is still more than I thought I was going to manage by this point. Alright, we're going to move to a slightly more serious and definitely more angry discussion now. So I have been at my institution for 6 years now, 4 years doing my PhD and 2 before that doing my master's, with some gaps and the start of a pandemic in there. And in that time I have seen over and over again upper management, so like the VC level of the university, tell us that they're strapped for money, that they're trying their best, that centralizing everything is based on student feedback, that all of the bullshit decisions they are making are in our best interests. And I don't know why in particular today the email we got made me fucking lose it, but it has, and I've talked about this in bits and pieces on here, so I just want to tell you what the situation is so that you're really clear what it is that I'm dealing with alongside doing my PhD in the first place, and also living with my disability and madness and so on. So I have a supervisor. I have 2 supervisors actually, but the most important one is my primary supervisor. She has been my supervisor since before I started the PhD. She's the one I asked to supervise my project when I applied. My thesis would not be what it is without her. I would not be the person I am without her. She and my relationship with her are utterly vital to my project. If I were to lose her as a supervisor, it would take time to find a replacement. I would have to build up a relationship with that replacement. I would have to catch that replacement up on the state of my thesis, which, this many years in, I've got a lot of stuff to catch them up on. and they are never going to have the context of having been with me for the period of working on that. Because what my thesis looks like now is not what it looked like at the start, right? You know, it also doesn't look like what my proposal was when I applied to do the thesis. These things make a difference. And even if I got someone basically identical to her with whom I could have just as good a relationship, it would still take that time, and there's no guarantee that that would happen. It's entirely possible I'd get someone who doesn't have the expertise I need because there's no one left, or you know, doesn't fit my project, is really overwhelmed because they've been given loads of PhDs to take on, you know, this kind of thing. I've also heard from other PhDs that the process for giving you a replacement doesn't go well. I have had a replacement secondary supervisor. My secondary supervisor was initially the wonderful woman who supervised my master's dissertation. She took voluntary severance last year or the year before, what is time? And I've been very lucky that it was my secondary supervisor, so whilst they're very important and their expertise is really helpful, and I loved her, and my new secondary supervisor is great and has different expertise that is also useful, you know, it's still another change to get used to, and that still took time as well. And actually my supervisor and I had to do a lot of the legwork in finding that replacement. So it's not simple, even if you get the good version of this process. Now, to make it clear how much of a threat this is, I am in the Division of Arts and Humanities. I think we're Arts and Humanities and Architecture, actually. Sorry, Architecture, for forgetting you. When I joined, I was in the School of English. I am now in the School of Humanities, because they have gotten rid of language, linguistics, philosophy, media, like huge amounts of the Department of Humanities. I came to Kent because it has one of the best creative writing programs in the country. Creative writing is now 2 part-time lecturers. It hasn't gone completely because we have one of the best creative writing programs in the country. But it's not in a good place because everyone is going, and not always by choice. Now, right now, the union have an agreement with the leadership that we won't have any forced redundancies. But one, the university has reneged on that agreement before when we had a previous version of that agreement, so they can't be trusted, and 2, there's still voluntary redundancies, and at this point I wouldn't blame people for taking them and going into the private sector, or, you know, looking for something that isn't an incredibly stressful situation where when booking a previous supervision, my supervisors said to me, can we wait until after this date to arrange when your next supervision will be? Because by that point we'll know if we still have a job. Which is a horrible situation for them. It's a horrible situation for me. And yet I am getting emails telling me that this is all being done in my best interest. And I am so angry. And scared and disappointed. I feel horrible for my supervisors and, you know, all the staff that I know who I've now worked alongside doing the shadowing scheme last term, and they're all wonderful people, and we're very lucky at Kent in humanities especially. The staff are very close-knit and looking after each other as best they can, but there's only so much that does. It doesn't change the fact that their jobs are constantly under threat. And, you know, it's scary for me. I can't imagine how scary it is for them, because unlike me, they actually get paid, which is a whole other kettle of problem. So that is the situation. That is why I'm very angry. My own job prospects after this, which, to be clear, are difficult in the first place because of my disability. I'm only ever going to be able to work part-time unless something radically changes, which it seems very unlikely to. I'm not going to stop being autistic. And, you know, whilst my physical disability can change, it seems unlikely that I'll suddenly get over the like lack of energy I have, or the chronic pain that I have, or anything like that. So it's difficult to think about having a future either, and I'm only just getting to a place where I'm able to imagine a future for myself anyway, just emotionally, and it's a very hard place to be. I am in the union as a PhD here in the UK. Even if you don't teach, even if you're not employed by the university, either as part of a scholarship, if you still have one of those, because they don't really exist anymore, or just otherwise, then you are able to join the union as a PhD member. We used to just be student members, but last year we got made, we have a specific like membership type now in the union, which is wonderful, and I do what I can to go to union meetings and support them, because that's the best thing I can do for myself now. Speaking out like this is also important, and so I wanted to do that today, as well as showing you that it's been a difficult week. So hopefully next week will be a bit easier. It might not. It's hard to know right now. It's a really difficult time. I'm very lucky to be surrounded by very supportive people. In the emotional sense, none of them are physically here, but it makes a big difference to me. So if you know someone who's in academia, especially in the UK right now, although also in the US, and probably other countries that I'm not aware of as well, just check in on them, make sure they're okay, because they're probably not, especially if they're in the arts and humanities. And thank you very much for listening to all of that. Thank you for learning and making yourself aware, and hopefully when I see you next week I'll have some happier, less angry things to say.